There you go. And welcome the hang gliding community that have turned up to support Johnny. Let me hand over to you, Johnny. I suggest we go for, I don't know how long your talk's going to be, but I know you've got a bit of a reputation.
About 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay, right, I'll try not to keep it too long, but first a couple of things about me, and first of all, thank you, Robin, for the introduction, and thank you again for everybody that's turned up. Also, I'd like to introduce, we've got some special guests here this evening that have turned up from the old days, and one of my very good friends who was a big influence on me when I first started hang gliding. He was a mega star then, and that's Brian Wood, wherever he's hiding there. So, give a big round of applause for Brian. When I started hang gliding, Brian was already British champion, and he's been, whatever there is to do in hang gliding in the early days, he's done it, and as I say, he was mega helpful to me, and, I don't want to embarrass him too much, but as I say, I really looked up to Brian as a pilot. He was mega, and we got some celebrities that were in the club. Chris Bartram, now Chris here, he edited Windsock for many, many years. Dave Gopel, I've got a quick story.
I have the distinction of having borrowed your hang glider and immediately crashed it.
Well, you might not remember this, but this is a true story. Somebody come up to, one of my good friends come up on the dyke one day and he was looking for me. I hadn't long started hang gliding, and this is my reputation, still exists to this day. And he said to this guy, I didn't know who Dave was, and he just said, "Excuse me, mate," he said, "I'm looking for Johnny Carr. Do you know, he's a mate of mine, do you know if he's up here?" And Dave reported, this is what the guy told me, he went, "Oh mate, he's not here." So that's Dave. Who have I forgotten there? And Terry Davis, Terry, he's been around a long time, he still now and again flies. We haven't seen him fly for a while, but he's got a rigid glider now, but he was around in the 70s as well. So, there's a few pilots here that have actually come out of the woodwork for this show tonight. So I'm really impressed that you guys have turned up. So thanks ever so much for being here, and I hope I can bring back a few memories from them days as well. So, okay, how I heard about hang gliding. It's probably been talked about before, but I was working with a guy, and we was talking as we were driving along towards the downs, and I said to him, "Oh, there's Wolstonbury Hill. I used to drive up there on my scooter and play up there as a kid." And he went, "Oh yeah," I said, "I think the birdmen fly around there," and I picked up my ears birdmen because I'd seen a programme on the telly the year before. This was in about 1973 that I heard this programme on the telly, and I watched it, and it was a Ken Messenger jumping off Mount Snowdon on a hang glider. And they said, "Oh, this is a new sport coming from America, and he's going to jump off Mount Snowdon." And when I watched him, with this flapping machine up on the top of the hill of a mountain, and he ran off, I just thought he's going to die. That was my first thought, And when he didn't, and he just flew off, and he just went out and out and out and out, and I think he glided for about a mile from that mountain, which is nothing in these days, but. And it took him about 4 minutes, and he landed. And I remember saying at the time, if he does this and lives, I'm going to do that. But I didn't know how to go about it. I didn't know where it was happening, and so it was so new. And I thought, if it comes down here anywhere, I'll do it. And when this guy said, "The birdmen fly up there somewhere," I went, "My God, really?" And you have a chat with Don. Don is the manager of the shop that we work for. Said his nephew does it, and he's pretty good at it. And I went, "Oh, really?" So I went straight back, "Don, what's this like? It's bloody birdmen stuff, And he told me about it, and he said, "Oh, come and see. I'll tell you where they go." And he said, he named some hills, and one of them was Mill Hill, and one was Stenning Bowl, and there was a couple of others, and I remember driving all that night, all round it, that evening, all round after work, looking for these birdmen, and I couldn't find them. And I went back, and he went, "Oh no, they were," and he might have said Beachy or something like that, and I didn't know about that. Anyway, about a week later, I went and I found them. They were at Mill Hill. And what the procedure was in them days was that there weren't no schools. So what happened is that you would go along, you ask questions. If you were interested, you bought the glider. You just bought one. If you wanted to do it, you buy a glider. And there was 2 manufacturers really on the South Downs that were One was Wasp Air, and they come out of London, Thornton Heath, and they would come down twice a week delivering gliders to people. And the other one was Highway, and they were at, I think, Bernard Road in Brighton. And they were there pretty much all the time anyway. And I went up, and there was a guy there, this guy's nephew who did it, you know, he said it was pretty good at it. It ended up being Ray Segrist, who you guys will remember.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Ray Segrist. And he said, my nephew, he's a postman. And I imagine this old boy with bicycle clips and stuff, you know, and made that, you know, Ray jumping as a wild, you know, and he was good, you know, so I pestered Ray, you know, what's all this, how do you do it, how do you steer them, and all this sort of thing. And Ray, bless him, you know, he put up with my, he must have had an earache, but as people do. And yeah, he warmed to me, and then he introduced me to people like Brian, and you know, and I was so obsessed with it. And I said, well, how much do these things cost then, you know? And I had a figure in my mind that if they were under 500 quid, you know, I would definitely buy one, you know, because I could afford it. I was doing all right, my own business in them days, and you know, and I thought if they're under 500 quid, but over that. And he went, well, he said, you know, see that one there? He said, that's 175 quid. And he said, but we're developing a new one, we're developing this new one that's going to be better than any of those, he said, and I said, well, how much is that going to cost, you know? And he went, 230 quid. I'll have one, I said. I want one of them. He said, we haven't made it yet, you know. And what it was, they copied a glider from America called a Seagull, and it had curved boom, and that's what the Wasp CB240 was. And I think there might be a picture of one on there, but if not, there's definitely a slide you'll see in a minute. So anyway, so I bought one, and I had to wait for it, and you know, and in the meantime, I was down there every blooming time it was flyable, asking all questions and stuff. Anyway, so that was it. So that was the Birdman. I've made some notes here, so I don't, you know, get too far ahead of myself. I said, well, I'm doing all right, actually. Yeah, now, when I got the glider, they said, well, your glider's arrived, and, you know, you can go over to Stenning and fly it, and have you got a crash helmet? And I went, oh, no, you know. So I had to dive into Port Slade and buy myself a crash helmet before I went up there, because I never even thought about stuff like that. And so I bought this, you know, the thing from, it was a little shop down near Port Slade Station. And I went up to Stenning, and you know, and that's where we used to fly. We used to fly, you know, Stenning Bowl, Mill Hill at Shoreham, a little place called Anchor Valley, which is up past Mill Hill. If you go to Mill towards Truly on that little lane, Anchor Bowl was down there, and we used to fly that place.
Johnny, sorry, you'd be about 21, 22 then, were you?
26, I think, 25,
26,
26.
older than I thought.
Yeah, well, 74, I was born in, yeah, work it out, I was born in 49, and it was just before whatever, you know, this was in June 74, so 49, you know, 69, 20,
25,
yeah, like 25, something like that. So I went up there, and as I say, my first introduction to hang gliding wasn't, you know, graceful, because you just bought the glider and you ask questions, and I mean nowadays you would never be allowed to do, well, you do some instructing, Chris, don't you? So you would know, you know. I mean, the thought of sending somebody off at the top of Stenning Bowl with a hang glider without wheels, you know, on the glider. Wheels were one of the biggest safety inventions to ever come to hang gliding, because no one had wheels, you know, in the old days. And I didn't really understand flying, because I had no theory or anything like that. I just said, well, what do you do if you want to go up? And they went, well, push out. What if you want to come down? Pull in. What if you want to turn left? Move over to the left. Move over to the right. You know, so it was just basic stuff. So, I mean, I've probably told people this before, privately and publicly. But, you know, I went off at Stenning Bowl. I'm on the top of Stenning Bowl, and I picked my glider up, and they said, are you ready? And I went, yeah. And so, like, run. And I started running, and they went, stop, you know. And I went, oh, stop, you know. And I said, what's the matter? What's the problem? He said, were you really going to go then? And I went, well, yeah. And he said, all right, okay then. No, so they obviously gave you a chance. That was their technique, to give you the chance. If you wanted to bottle out, you could, you know, sort of thing. So I went, all right, okay, yeah. So I went off, you know, and I went, and it was a perfect launch. And I'm flying out of Stenning Bowl, and I probably got 100 feet underneath me, and I think, oh, this is peachy, you know, this is really good. And I thought, well, do you know, I'm not frightened at all. I think I'll go up, you know. So I pushed the bar out, and all this flapping that was behind me stopped. Because when you were flying and you were flying properly, you knew you were flying because you could hear this of the flapping sail of the trailing edge. And all this flying stopped, you know, and I just thought, oh, that's funny, it's all gone quiet. And then suddenly all hell let loose. The nose went down, the glider started hurtling towards the ground, and all I could hear was this flapping so bad, and I was going so fast. And I remember, if you want to slow down, push out. So I pushed out, and my whole flight from the top of Stelling Bowl was a series of stall, recover, and like that. And at the last second, when I pushed out, luckily, you know, I wasn't that close to the ground, you know, but I was at the perfect height. Because if I'd been much higher, when I stalled, it would have gone in badly, you know. And then someone said to me, oh, Johnny, I think you stalled. And I said, well, what's that? No idea, you know. So that's to give you, that was my very first taste of hang gliding. Anyway, it transpired that it wasn't all my fault, because even if you relaxed on the bar, it stalled. You know, and I found out because Ray Seacrest had a go at it, and he said to me, look, Johnny, this bloody thing stalls all over the place, the hang point's in the wrong place, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I took it back to Wasp Air, and they sorted it out. So that was that. So, you know, the first school that ever came to the South Downs was a guy called Malcolm Hawksworth, and he started a school, and he did it properly. He had a shop that he opened up in Lewis Road, and you know, I was really excited that there was somebody going to teach people, and you could buy gear from him. And I remember buying a ventimeter that you held up to see what the wind speed was, and bought a flying suit, and you know, and I eventually, because he imported Wills wing gliders, I bought a Wills wing from him, an SST. And so schools were something that were nothing. There was no such thing as schools until Malcolm Hawksworth hit the South Downs and started doing that. And his school was along Lewis Road in Brighton. Now, Dale Clothier, who's not here, and I haven't seen Dale for years, but you know, he learned to fly with me at about the same time. He said to me, there's this site, Johnny, did you not go out at the weekend? I went, no, I didn't. And I said, well, you know, he said, well, we found this new site, and it's called Firle. And I went, wow. And he said, the lift off of that place, he said, is fantastic. He said, you know, just go up. And I went, oh, really? And he said, yeah. And he told me, you know, he told me all how to get there and everything. And I went there and I found this place, and we called it Bow Peak now, by the way, but it was then called Firle. And it was a magic place for lift. And one little thing I haven't touched on in the early days, when we used to fly, we'd take off from the hill, and you would just take off and you would just go down. You would just literally take off and go down. No one stayed up. And it was a big skill to literally stay in the air doing anything but top to bottoms. Now, and if you took off and you didn't go straight to the bottom, i.e. often we would go to Stelling Bowl and you'd take off and you'd fly and you'd go out, and then you would just go out and you get a lift on the way out. And we used to call that magic lift, because we didn't know things about thermals. We just called it magic lift because it was all so new. Now, Brian, you know, who I was talking to him earlier, and I'd love you if you'd just come and tell the people just a little bit, because Brian was probably the first person to actually stay up, and that was at Truly Hill, and this was before I was flying. So if you just explain, Brian, how you did it, because it is really interesting.
Yeah, well, my experience in hang gliding just quickly is from 74 to about 79 here in the UK. And I must just have to say that it was pure luck. All the things I did, the flights, I can only say it's luck. You know, it's just, you know what it's like, you get on the hill.
Still is.
So, I'm still flying. So,
can I just say, I think Brian's been a bit modest. He's a bit better than that. Yeah.
Anyway, so I was saying to John earlier, I'd had the glider, I don't know, it was about a couple of weeks now, weekends, that's all I could fly. And it was winter time, and I hadn't had it long. It was a Wasp 229B3, cost me 159 quid from Wasp, topless, remember. And I went down to Truly Hill, and we got down. It was freezing cold. I remember it was a freezing cold north wind of some sort, and I could see two gliders on the top. So I went up to the top, carried it all up there, and I said, "Why aren't you flying?" As John said, they all had. In them days, you had to have the ventimeter. That was the equipment you had. If you had one then you was the bollocks, you know. So I've got this thing, and it was installed, I remember from the start, it was installed in me that you never fly over 19 mile an hour, which common sense was you're just going to go backwards into the farmer's edge and wild fence and stuff. That was pretty obvious. But the other thing was never fly vertical cliffs, because the rotor, didn't know what that meant, but anyway, didn't sound too good. So I got down there and I said to the lads, why aren't you flying? I just drove 2 hours and they said, well, you know, it's 20, 22, 24. And I sat there and I thought, I ain't sitting here no more, I've come all this bloody way. So I rigged it up, and because I went to pick it up, I couldn't do it, it was just impossible. So I got a bloke on the front and I said to him, you're never going to fly. I said, I'm going to give it a go. So we walked down. By then there was no such thing as soaring. No one had ever soared. Like John said, all our flying hang gliders was, you know, if anyone done that, whoa, did you see that? and landed at the bottom. So anyway, so I've got it where we normally run to take off, and I realised I wasn't going to be able to do that. So I said to the bloke, don't let go, for Christ's sake. That was really going good. So I said, go down a bit further. So he went down a bit further, and I thought, well, no, I don't think so. I'm looking back at the wire fence and everything. Bit further still, so he got there. I said, all right, let go. Thinking I'm going to go like that, he went, whoa, straight up. Oh, I thought, no. And it was going up and up, and because now, for the first time, I'm looking down at these people, and I'm thinking, when's this going to stop? And it kept going up and up, and now I'm completely petrified now, because I've not been in that situation. So I grabbed the front wires, and I was hanging on them, and I could see that I was travelling forwards very slowly. And I was going forward, my old heart was going, and slowly it started to go down a bit. So I thought, I'm looking at the fields now out there, instead of the field down there we landed in. And so I sort of come off onto the base bar, and I noticed it was going backwards. I thought, oh yeah, so I kept going, and I remember going past where I took off, and it started to come down again. And I pulled the bar, and it went out and up. And I realised there was this invisible band of air going up. And so I turned right and went along there and come back along there. By now I'm freezing cold because it was winter time, and just went out and landed. I think it was about 35 minutes. Well, of course, in them days, it was never heard of. You know, the only time you could get time in the air is by going off a really, really high place. So that was the opening to us with ridge soaring. And because we progressed from that, everyone then was throw the thing away. Now let's go. And because then we got into top landing and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, great. The good thing was, in them days, unlike today, it seems to me, is everybody now is all serious with all this equipment, and they're going to do this and that, and then return out here and back and all that stuff, which is brilliant, of course. But in our days, every time we went to the hill, it was an adventure. There'd been nothing done. The goalposts were wide open, and we were, in our sort of time, we were the lucky ones to explore all this soaring and top landing and 360s, and then into thermals, and then you're getting these small machines, you know, which told you whether you're going up or down in lift and all this sort of stuff. So, brilliant days, absolutely brilliant. Every weekend was an adventure, and on the South Downs we was lucky because the competition just amongst the lads, who could get top of the stack and who could do those, who could go furthest down the ridge and all that. It was just a little competition every weekend, you know, great fun. And there was a good crowd of folks down there, all very good pilots. A lot of them weren't bothered with competitions, just quickly going all through the years. I could never afford it. The first glider I sold an old boat I had, speedboat, to buy this glider at 140 odd quid. And then I was so lucky to do well in the first few weekends I did it. Sort of wasp, like they was, they are not silly people. They said, well, give us your old glider and we'll give you the latest one we got. And so then I got onto the realising, hang on, if I can do things that people haven't done, and then we had competitions, then I'd get free gliders. So all my flying career, right through, I never paid for gliders. I flew for factories, you know, all different factories. And I think the two proudest moments of my life was the first flight, without a doubt. That was off the top of the hill, you know, no instruction, nothing, just straight off and down and landed. And many years later, Steve Moyes and Bill Moyes were my heroes in them days, amongst some of the Americans. And Steve Moyes come over and I beat him into he was in second place and I beat him. And Bill Moyes, I sort of got to know him on the circuits all around Europe and that. And Bill come over and said to me, if you want to fly my gliders, you know, fly my gliders, please. And so then the same day, there's always a handshake in them days, you know, no monies. So he said, I'll leave you this glider. I said, Bill, I can't buy your glider. He said, no, leave this one. He said, if you sell it, I want 500 quid for it. See me next time on the circuit. Give me the money or give me the glider, give me the later one. So yeah, so I had all the latest, smallest gliders, you know, it was really, really good. And I could go out to places, like to Wells in Canada and that, and Bill would turn up with all the gear. I just took my harness and my hat, really. And Bill would be there with the gliders, and Steve, we'd build them up for the airport and all that sort of thing. Anyway, I could sit here all day. I'm better than John, but, you know. If anyone's got any questions quick for, you know, about anything, then you're more than welcome to ask, you know, whether it's now or after.
Yeah,
Were you using instruments at all?
Sorry?
Do you have varios at all then?
No, not in the first
Even a
time.
bit more?
No, but I can remember that was, yeah, we got one.
Wind meters, and that was about it.
That was, you was the business if you had that. You know. But, yeah.
I didn't have a vario when I started.
No, well, they weren't invented then.
And another thing we didn't have as well was parachutes. Parachutes were
They were
something
for
we
wusses.
didn't- Yeah, they were. They were for wusses like me when I started to get high.
But they ended up that you had to have them for competition, and they made it a law. You had to have so.
I don't mind who answers
Stand
it,
shout.
but I've got one question, and it's looking at the picture on there and recalling my very brief experience of hang gliding, which I think was probably in 1977. Can you say a bit about the harness?
Oh yeah. Yeah, nutcracker one, wasn't it?
Yeah, nutcracker harnesses. Yeah, the first ones didn't have a wooden seat, and I don't know whether this one has.
No, it hasn't.
But then they had the wooden seat on them that made them. So you take off and then you shuffle the seat under your buttocks and get
swing.
more comfortable. But it was, yeah, it was pretty uncomfortable flying. But you had a lot more control because if you got into a big left-hand turn, you could hang out past the A-frame. You know, whereas when you're prone, you'll hit the A-frame, but the gliders are so much more manoeuvrable now, so it doesn't matter. But in them days, you needed a lot of control, so it was, you know. But I think it might be an opportunity now on Talking Slides to actually run through a few slides, Martin.
Yeah.
But thank you, Brian. We're so honoured to have Brian here.
Johnny, sorry, maybe if we've got time, Brian can tell us when I first met him, he was training me. And I think it was after I'd actually had my flight that you told me about a rather alarming incident you had out in Koessen. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps you can take us through that one.
Talk about that one, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this is a guy called Tony Beresford. This is Mill Hill at Shoreham, which we're obviously not allowed to fly now, but it's a story I'll touch on with the Ada District Council. They didn't like us flying at Mill Hill, and they did all their damnedest which they won in the end, to get a bylaw out to prohibit us from flying there. But this place, it's southwesterly here, is, you know, nowadays would be absolutely, it would be fantastic, or it would be a zoo, you know, because there'd be too many people using it. But if you could work it that you only had half a dozen in the air at any one time, you get away from there, no problem. It really worked good. And we used to try, what a trick was, we used to try and get as high as we could. We used to get really high, you know, 1,500, 2 grand there. And then the deal was, Shoreham Airport said that if you can land in the airport perimeter, we'll give you a bottle of scotch. Seriously, and Martin Hunt, who was the one of the directors of Highway Aviation, and he said, and I'll match it, you know. And so we used to get really high, you know, I mean, that's not particularly high, but, you know, if you can imagine getting, you know, 3 or 4 times higher than that, and then you head out towards Shoreham Airport and the flyover. I mean, on modern gliders, you just do it without even worrying about it, but in them days, I mean, the glide was sort of like 1 in 4. So you get high and you glide out and you glide out, but and then suddenly you just come out of the lift and you just go, and then you'd end up sort of near the flyover, not even going across it, just short of it, and you'd end up diving back trying to get back to Mill Hill. And then, but what they didn't say is how you could get there, because, you know, once I started to get into cross country, I took off at Ditchling Beacon, flew from Ditchling Beacon along to Trueley Hill, got a weak thermal at Trueley Hill and was diving over the back in the thermal, and I just suddenly thought, hey, hang on a minute, you know, there's Shoreham Airport down there, I can get in there. And I went over about 300 feet above Mill Hill, you know, but downwind and glide landed into the airport, and I've got me 2 bottles of scotch, and I've got it presented to me at Shoreham Open Day, you know, Shoreham Airport, you know, at an open day there. So this is Tony Beresford again. So okay, pass another slide over, and then I'll show you some of the people. That's me on my first 260
with the curved leaf.
Curved boom, yeah.
That's like you've got high heels on.
Yeah,
There,
and
Johnny.
that's my little yellow crash helmet that I bought before I could fly. Yeah. Okay, move on. Then. That's Ray Segrist, the guy that I pestered and harassed about. You know, how do you do this, Ray? You know, what if, and you know. Well, there you go. There's the harness. Look, there's the.
Looks like
David Williams today.
And as I say, we had no wheels on those days at all.
And the C G adjustment is the bar going across
Yeah,
on the A-frame.
yeah. I think there was, and this thing here was called a soaring bar.
That's it, sorry.
That's the soaring bar. So what would happen is that the glider was always sort of like trying to stall on you, if you like. You know, it was very, you know, nose light. And so you were always pulling in, and your arms were aching after a while, you know. So when people say to you now, "Oh, do your arms ache?" you actually say, "Well, they did," you know. But it wasn't because you were hanging on; it was literally because you were pulling the bar to stop it from stalling. But when you had this soaring bar, what happened is that the straps came in front of that. So as you were flying, it was pulling the A-frame into your body all the time. And that's what Wasp did for me, because I kept stalling the glider, sort of inadvertently in the end. And so that was what we called a soaring bar. So yeah, carry on, Martin. That's the monster thing. I mean, you know, you look at gliders now, and they're probably 140 square foot. You know, that was 240 square foot. So massive thing. And the next glider I got was 260 square foot. So they were just monster marquees almost in them days. So.
And heavy or not?
No, not particularly heavy. No, single surface stuff.
Either.
Yeah.
I mean,
Any paraglider pilots here?
Yeah.
Right. Do you know Ian Grayland?
yes.
Yeah.
Right. That's him there. That's Ian Grayland there with the hat on.
It's Tom Knight, isn't it?
And that's Tom Knight, Malcolm Hawksworth. I'm not sure. Could that be Ian White?
It does look like him, doesn't it?
Do you know, I've looked at that the other day, and I hadn't seen this before, and it's how I remember.
I don't think it is him.
No, but it just looks a bit
It
like
does
Ian,
look like
doesn't
him,
it?
but it's
Yeah.
wrong, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably a
And
bit too.
who was the sail maker for the young kiddie that used to work for Ian? There's a sail maker, Clive Betts. Is that be Clive?
Yeah.
No?
I don't think it is.
No, okay, I'm not sure. You know, so I was just asking the question. So, yeah, but that's Tom Knight. He had a school as
There was
well.
Bill Payne as well, wasn't there? Wasn't
Bill
there?
Payne, yeah. I'm not sure, so I won't.
He was a long time after that.
Okay, Terry.
Johnny, Ian Grayland designed the iconic Clubland, didn't he?
Yeah. And then I think he had something to do with the lightning as well, with
He did. He designed
the microlights and stuff.
And the laser.
Okay, move on then. So, this was Camlong Down. This was a site that I went back to in 1980 and just thought, yeah, well, let's go away from
crowd.
it. Yeah, there was a big competition in them days. You know, that was sponsored by Ball's Woodpecker Cider, I think. This is a guy called Miles Handley. That's the original Skyhook, I think, his glider that he flew. Again, notice the original old-fashioned harness. He went on. Miles Handley went on and designed the Griffon, and you know, he's a really good designer. And the Gulp, the Gulp as well. And sadly, I've heard that he's no longer with us, but yeah, it's really sad that. Okay, Martin. Right, this is me sort of launching and probably getting blown backwards a bit, or struggling to get over the front of the hill. So I've got my high heels on, I think. It was like that because I went to land and I just went... I just flopped on the beach, and it took me about 15-20 minutes before I actually people come down and you were right, you know, well, yeah, I just can't feel my legs. You know, and if I told you, and because it was a record for prone at the time, because Woodsy here, he got sort of 8.5 hours flying at Rossili for doing seated, which was a record at the time, and that's probably if we have a big do on our 50th anniversary, which I'd like to do, I'd love to get Brian down as well, because he's got so many stories to tell you about his, his endurance flight and stuff like that, and how he had people lowering food down to him and everything. 8.5 hours in the air is pretty wild, I think. So, but I thought, well, if he's got that record, I'll try and get the prone record. And so, I did this 4.25 hours, and when I landed, I couldn't, Now, if you could imagine a 26-year-old kid, right, going out, they're all going out partying all night long, and they can stay up and stay awake. Highway took me out for a meal round the corner, Port Island, round the corner from Rossilli, and we went to a restaurant in a pub there, and they took me out to dinner, because they good publicity for their glider, wasn't it? They were the prime British record. And I'll tell you what, I fell asleep on the table. I was so shattered, so exhausted, and it took it. I was only 26, and I was pretty fit, So it was, knee hanger harnesses were, dodgy, Okay, move on, Martin. Yeah, that's higher again at Mill Hill. That's on my CB240. That's Tony again. Again, Mill Hill was a really good site, but you can all recognise it from the flyover. And
We've gone back.
We've gone round, haven't we?
oh, we've gone round. Okay,
Yeah,
in that case, right. Okay, right. If you want to put some lights on, I'll do a little bit of talking, and then we'll do one of Martin's very kindly brought us some slides as well. So, okay, let me go on. Right.
Nope.
How and why the club started. Okay. Well, basically, we were getting a lot of bad press, and some of it is up on the board there and stuff. And I might just clip a newspaper out. But we had a lot of people that were for us. So there was the Ada District Council were the main people that were against us, and the people that lived on the road that used to go up to Mill Hill.
Yeah,
The councillors living there, and a lot of influential people lived there, and they would, they hated the fact that all these cars were coming up on hang gliders and people coming up to watch them die, and all the people were stopping along the road at the bottom of Mill Hill and clogging up the road, because no one had ever seen anything like what we were doing. It was just like, oh my God, these nutters, they're going to die, Probably a bit like the early days, people going to motorsports, because, watching people going around, Formula One sort of thing, and waiting for the crash. But and now and again they were, they got lucky and people did crash. But by and by, a lot of people, did hurt themselves, but it wasn't an everyday occurrence. You couldn't sort of say, oh well, I'm going to go and I'm going to watch someone.
It's quite some big crowds, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it was.
You get people just standing in front of you thinking you
Yeah.
can take off vertically.
Yeah, I know. It was madness in them
I
days.
used to get those silly questions about, can you steer it?
Yeah.
Still got those questions.
What happens if you let go?
How do you come down?
Yeah. Oh yeah, you still get that now, don't you?
Yeah, if the wind stops, you fall out of the sky.
Yeah, you got it. But as I say, so we soon got wise to the fact that they looked at us as just a bunch of
A motley crew.
a motley crew. Basically, that's a good a motley crew of people that are just all mad. They've got these things and the contraptions that they just take off wherever they want, do whatever they want. Don't decide about anybody, So we got wise to the fact that if we formed a club, then we would have, one person that they could speak to. We could have a whole club, that everybody joined this club, and then we could negotiate with landowners and the councils, and then they would have one person who was in charge that they could say to the members, we want this, and then we could say, well, we'll actually stand by rules, providing that they are, sensible and fair for everybody, and that's what happened. The club got formed purely because we needed to look responsible and have a body of guys on a committee that could make rules and regulations in the interest of the safety and for the protection of landowners and keep the council happy and stuff like that. And if they weren't happy about something, they could come and talk to the club about it. And in 1974, we formed the Southern Riding Club.
Was there a BHGA then?
No, there was an NHGA, and there was a British Kite Soaring Association, wasn't there, Brian?
Yeah, they joined together, didn't they?
Yeah, British Kite Soaring Association was down in the West Country, I think, and there was someone up north, and I can't remember who that was, but the National Hang Gliding Association, it wasn't NHGA, but the National Hang Gliding Association, was who we were a member of down here. But it transpired there was a lot of controversy, for want of a better word, because it was all a bit hush-hush at the time, but the guy who was director of Wasp Air was also the chairman of the, or the head of the National Hang Gliding Association. So if somebody was to phone up the National Hang Gliding Association, actually I want to buy a hang glider, how do I go about that? I wonder who he was going to put in touch. So he was, and this became actually, this was sort of like, what's it, Boris' job, it was Watergate affair,
They would only approve their own gliders. They would only approve their own gliders.
Yes, but no one knew at the time that John James, actually was John Haynes, and so when that came out, there was riots, it was massive, and all around the hang gliding world. So the only way that was going to stop them, sort of, a big sort of like, I don't know what would have happened, but they decided, look, let's sort this out. Let's have one body and we'll amalgamate. And I think we went up to Coventry or somewhere, wasn't it? Was it Brian Coventry? And we all went up to Coventry and they amalgamated the National Hang Gliding Association, the British Kite Soaring Association, and whoever association. They all merged together and become the British Hang Gliding Association. And then that's how the BHGA was born. But when I started, there was no BHGA. It was all, and I've got early flypaper magazines from the National Hang Gliding Association, where they had little A5 paper, flyer type things, which was folded in half like that, and and that was your magazine, and it was all right. You could read it and stuff. So that was how the British Hang Gliding Association was. Now we were also getting lots of bad press because the Ada District Council didn't want to sell anymore, and so one of the things they were saying was, well, these people are taking up all the hospital beds. All these accidents are happening. They're breaking their arms, they're breaking their legs, they're all in hospital, and they're draining the resources of the NHS. And I can remember I was trying to teach people at Mill Hill one day, and tandem, and this guy sort of just froze and he just wrapped his arms around the upright and palmed into the bloody hill, and I twisted my ankle. And when I got to the hospital, they said to me, "Oh, how'd you do this?" And I said, "Oh, I fell off a ladder." I was an aerial rigger at the time, picking up TV aerials, so I just said, "Oh, I slipped off my ladder and twisted my ankle." Oh, okay, because every case that they had, it was just going against us, So that was the thing. If you had an accident, you just didn't say you did it hang gliding, But there was a lot of people that was trying to get rid of us, and people that weren't. And in the end, they had a public inquiry to actually get a bylaw to ban hang gliding, at Mill Hill, Shoreham. And they had the conservation people saying, well, we're frightening away the chalk-hill, the very rare chalk-hill blue butterfly. We're eroding the hill, the paths that go down to across the hill. Hang gliders are eroding it because they're going up and down now. I don't know if you guys have ever gone past Mill Hill. We haven't been there for 30 years, I should think. But if you go past Mill Hill now, you look and them paths are still eroded, so it's just people, so. But they had a public inquiry, and there was people stood up at the public inquiry. One guy stood up at the public inquiry and actually said, "Look, these guys should be, encouraged. They are the people that they've got the spirit of the people in the Battle of Britain. They got, they're sort of like people that Spitfire pilots were made of. We should, encourage these guys. So there was people that stood up at the inquiry and said, because I went there to it, and they said these people should be encouraged, but there was other people, that sort of, we're flying the chalk-hill blue butterfly, we're, causing accidents and taking up hospital beds and all this sort of stuff, And then somebody died at Mill Hill while the inquiry was going on, which was tragic, and of course that didn't help matters. And anyway, to cut a long story short, they got their ban, and they banned us from Mill Hill, and that was it. Shoreham Airport actually stood by us and said, "Look, nothing to do with us, boys. We've never been against you flying," and they said, "Look, you can carry on flying there." And I remember going up there. We ignored the ban, And I remember going up there one day and I was soaring around and I top landed and a policeman come up to me and he said, you know you're not supposed to be doing this, don't you? And I went, well, yeah. I said, but, you know, I think, you know, I told him, I said, I think it's biased. They just, you know, set us up. They didn't want us to fly here. It's just, you know, posh bastards living down the road didn't want us here. And, you know, and so they put in complaints about it. And the copper said, look, he said, I'll tell you what, mate. He said, I've got my job to do. He said, I've done it. I've told you that you're not allowed to fly here. He said, now, I'm going now. He said, so, he said, what you do after that is up to you. He said, but I've just told you, all right? You know, I went, okay, mate, thanks very much. Now, as it happened, I'd had a good day and I'd had all I wanted, so I just packed up anyway. But the copper wasn't saying, right, I'm going to watch you pack away and go. He basically said, look, I'm off, you know, but I've told you, you know, and if you want to, you know, do what you've got to do, sort of thing. So the police generally were, you know, I'm not saying that all coppers did that, but that, swear to God, that happened to me. A copper sort of said that to me and he was quite happy about it. So people still flew at Mill Hill and took their chances of it. And then Shoreham Airport got a tarmac runway. And that changed everything because then Shoreham Airport said, look guys, no, you said you can fly and you can fly, but we don't want you going more than 50 foot above the hill because we're now going to have a lot of traffic coming over Mill Hill to land on the runway. So, you know, we're not going to, we're quite happy, but don't go over 50 foot. But of course that really screwed it for everybody and we didn't want to, because Shoreham Airport have been, you know, so cooperative all the way along, you know, we just said, look, fair enough, we won't fly there. So now, you know, of course it's now like a proper airport and you just don't go in the ATZ and stuff like that. But in the early days, you know, Shoreham Airport, you know, they didn't mind at all. They said, and Martin reminded me, I think it was earlier, that, you know, they had a sort of like, when they're using the west runway, you know, which was a grass runway following the coast, you know, it was all right. They would put a green flag up or a green board up on the watchtower sort of thing. And when they didn't want us to fly there for whatever reason, they put a red one up, you know. So, but yeah, they were very cooperative. You know, that was Mill Hill. So in the early days of the Southern Hang Gliding Club, Mill Hill was the place, and Stemming. Okay, so let me just wander on a little bit more. Yeah, so before this bylaw came out, we sent a load of people out. We all had petition boards, and we would collar members of the public to sign the, you know, do you like hang gliding? Well, yeah, we do. Would you mind signing here then? You know, and we got, you know, several. I can't remember. I don't want to exaggerate. Say it was 8,000. It might have been 800, but I thought it was more than that. But 8 something rings a bell. So, do you remember how many it was, Martin? It was a lot of signatures because everybody said, yeah, I'll sign that. I'll sign that. I'll sign that. And we had a load of hang glider pilots just, you know, going around all the hills where we were flying and just getting signatures from thousands of people. Yeah. So yeah, we were very popular with the public. I'll tell you now. That's it. Yeah, we would. Yeah, I've done that. So, and then we had the emergence of paragliding, which was paragliding was a fairly controversial subject to start with. But then, you know, we were controversial when we were going to go and fly in the you know, places like the Long Mynd, you know, where they had a gliding club. You know, well, what's these new people? You know, we don't like them flying and sort of stuff. And so they, you know, they were a bit anti us. And the place was where it was worse was the place just north of London. What's the place? Dunstable Down, yeah. Dunstable Down. I mean, that was, you know, World War III with hang gliders and Dunstable Down in the old days. You know, so you know, so we couldn't understand that. You know, we couldn't understand why they felt like that. You know, and of course now suddenly we've got paragliders to contend with, and paragliders turning up on the
What year did that happen?
I think it was about, someone might be able to correct me on this, but I think it was about 1989, 1990s. It was in that sort of era, you know. I mean, I'll be honest, when I saw Michel coming, I was a part
Michel really, yeah.
Yes.
I think 86 is the number.
And 86
pops into my head.
It may be, but it wasn't a problem for us in 86.
I think we had it as a quiz question a month ago. I think 1984 rings a bell, but that was probably the first.
Maybe in France.
Experimental glider overseas. I don't think they'd reached the UK by then.
Michel Carnet came up to me one day and he went, hey Johnny, because I was a partner with him with Sky Systems for years, and he said to me, I was only a silent partner, I didn't have much to do with it, I just wasn't, you know, he just used my name in the early days and then made a big name for himself, so he didn't really need me anyway. So he was, but, you know, he was very switched on, Michel, you know, and, you know, he was a chalk and cheese person. You either liked him or you didn't like him, I didn't like him, but he was very innovative, and he saw paragliding as a good thing, and he said, oh, these paragliders, Johnny, I think they're going to catch on. And he brought some over from France, and I'll tell you what, they were like bricks, you know. We took off one day, and I watched them take off, and they just went, look, worse than the first hang gliders, you know. And I looked at him and I said, are you sure, you know, what are you talking about? They're terrible, you know. And he went, have a go on one, John. I went, no chance, mate, you know. And the very first paragliders, you know, I'll tell you now, they were like flying bricks, you know, but he said, well, they're going to improve, they're going to improve. And,
Got everyone to fly.
and it's like, you know, you look at the hang gliding pictures on there, when they were flying bricks too, you know, and you look where they've come now. And, you know, but because of the paragliding, when they were flying bricks, they were all right. It didn't matter to us, you know, they just gone down, or, you know, and we were going, whee, you know. But when then they suddenly started to get good and started to get on a par with us, you know, but they flew a lot slower, you know, and everybody sort of was flying together, and it was a bit of a mess. And there was, you know, it was a bit of a controversial subject within the club, and there was, you know, people that didn't want them there at all, and there was people that tolerated them, and there was people that thought, well, you know, if you can't beat them, join them.
And there were two separate national associations at the time
yes,
as well.
Yeah, and
so
there was, that's right, there was a bit like the kite surfing, like the kite surfing association, and
Johnny,
you know, and
Johnny, do you remember that AGM? I think it was 1989, and it nearly came to blows with John Charlton.
Yeah, the emergency handle.
Remember, because he wanted, he wanted paragliding totally banned.
Yeah.
They wanted it to be a separate club.
Yeah.
And that was the first meeting I ever went to, and I thought, what's going on these guys? Because I thought it was going to be a fight. It was that you know, there was so much aggression against it then.
I didn't really want to go too deep into that one tonight.
This is a celebration.
Yeah, this is a celebration of love. But yeah, but John's right, to give you an idea, and Dave will know, you know, there was a lot of aggravation with hang gliders and paragliders at the time, and you know, I mean, some people actually thought that paragliders might get so many that hang gliders wouldn't be able to take off at the dike anymore. I hate to say that, but you know, but someone prophesied that, you know. I think John Charlton might have been the. Don't get into politics. Don't get into politics, but yeah, you know, there was that. But to be fair, and I will be fair, the Southern Hang Gliding Club has adapted with that, and the Southern Hang Gliding Club does recognise that its roots, you know, and the committee of which I'm on the committee as president of the club, and I'm there to sort of like, you know, and I look at my role as a sort of like an intermediary, if you like, and try and please everybody and make sure that we don't get shafted and make sure they don't get shafted. And in the early days, you know, they were about to get shafted, and I did a major part of preventing that from happening. And likewise, you know, with it now, with the hang gliders being so few and paragliders being so many, you know, the paragliders do see that, and they do support hang gliding in a fantastic way by paying for an aero tow site for us, for instance. You know, they look at the aero tow site as like another club site, and they pay the dues, whatever that costs, and they've supported us with the tug and things like that. If we skink, they help us out. So, and I can see, and I'm going to urge all the hang glider pilots here, you know, that to actually think about getting an aero tow rating and join the aero tow group, because we don't get this, you know, sitting on the hill and waiting for a slot to fly. I mean, don't get me wrong, we can still fly hang gliders at the dike if the wind's blowing a decent breeze. You know, we can still fly and sky out and do all the things we used to do. It's just on the very light wind days. Now, on those days, it's perfect for aero towing. So, if it's a light wind day, I'll go aero towing over sitting on the dike, waiting for it, A, to get a slot, and B, for it to wait for it, to sea breeze and then turn my glider around, face southwest and then de-rig it and go home. I'd rather sit on an airfield, 5 miles inland from the sea, and take my chances with that and get an aero-towed. So I'd urge everybody that's here that's interested in flying hang gliders, do think about getting your aero-tow rating. Come and join us in the aero-tow group, and you will get some really good quality airtime. And when you're on that line, unless there might be one other person already in the air, but that's it. You've got the sky to yourself. So any questions on that? And then we're going to put Martin.
How high does the winch go?
Sorry?
How high does the winch go?
It's not a winch. We go to 2,000 feet beyond the aero.
How high are you going then?
2,000 feet.
Oh, okay.
You get pinged off. That's the sort of the rule. At 2,000 feet, you get pinged off. If you want to go higher, you can. But if you're in competition and you want your flight to count, you don't go to $5,000. You take off at 2,000 feet and then go cross country.
In reality, you've often released lower than that. As soon as you go through a thermal,
you can if you want to. Yeah.
500 feet.
Do you have to, is it the cost of fuel? Is it just
yeah, it costs you for a ton. Yeah, £15 a ton to 2,000 feet. So yeah, that's it. And just to let you know, our club, because our club helps with the aero-tow, you have to be a member of the Southern Hang Gliding Club and obviously the BHPA. So you're a member of the Southern Hang Gliding Club, should be a member of the BHPA anyway. You join that, costs you 50 quid. You join the aero-tow group, costs you 50 quid. So that's a 100 quid layout. That gives you aero-tow and access to all Southern Hang Gliding Club sites. So when it's breezy, you go and fly hang gliding. The hang glides on the hillsides. And then you have a £15 tow to 2,000 feet. And it's lovely, and if you go to 2,000 feet on a modern glider, it can take you 20 minutes to get down anyway, so you have a nice little flight, and if you do that on a sailplane, down at Parham or somewhere like that, it probably 65 quid or something like that for a top to bottom, I don't know, don't quote me on that, it's something like that. And any other aero-tow club in the country, is way more, not just a little bit more, way more expensive than the Southern Hang Gliding Club aero-tow group. So I see, we are lucky in the Southern Hang Gliding Club because the club do support hang gliders in that regard, we have got without getting into it too deeply, we have got a marshalling system that we could implement, and we could say, right, half an hour hang gliders, half an hour paragliders, but I tell you, the ag of trying to set that up and get that in motion is, no one really seems to be bothered about it. Yes, Maciej?
What about training?
Training, yeah, well, I'm a senior aero-tow coach. Steve Marnier is a senior aero-tow coach. Dave Matthews is a senior aero-tow coach. There's a little bit of grey area because officially we may need Ian Curran to come down and watch us teaching one day, all three of us, and then say, yep, you can do teaching. I mean, I would be only interested really in teaching somebody who's a hang glider pilot who can fly hang glider but never been aero-towing, and then that's it. So that's the sort of person I want to teach. I'm not interested in teaching. That's a school's job. Someone who says, "Oh, I want to fly, mate. How do I do that?" "Oh yeah, jump on the aero-tow and we'll teach you from nothing, from scratch." That's a school's job. But I see my job as an aero-tow coach to teach people like you, Maciej, that's never been in the aero-tow before, to tell you all about, how to launch and whatever. Landing is down to you because you're an hang glider pilot at the end of the day. But just all the things about just getting on the launch and safely launching, and getting off the tug and stuff like that. So we hope to do that. We are hoping to do that, and it may be. What do you think, Steve? Is it an Ian Curran job? We think,
Yes, get Ian down for the day, and he can watch us and hopefully sign us off.
Yeah.
But at the moment, we're not qualified or certified for doing it.
No.
Cambridge aero-tow is really the main place where you can get trained and rated.
Yeah. So that's it. So Cambridge is the way to go at the moment, but people have been doing that. But yeah, at the moment that is it. But Martin has got here a little bit of aero-towing, which, as we're on the subject, we're blending.
Which one is it in? Which one is it in, Johnny?
Yes, let me find the file.
Johnny,
if anybody wants to get a drink or
I was going to say, we've been going in now. Is it a convenient time
Have a
to
break.
take a 10-minute break?
Yes.
I'll be in the audio check.
like to take all the glory?
Yeah, I'm just happy with this today.
Up on the board that I've put there, but I'll just read this to you. It was in one of the local papers. It said, Batmen of tomorrow. Still in its infancy, but now assuredly the dynamic sport of tomorrow, hang gliding has already established itself on the South Downs near Steyning. Regularly, as the weather conditions allow, these modern day Batmen wing their separate ways down the steeply pitched slopes from the Bostel into the hollow known locally as Soper's Bottom. Picture below left. Gliders fit themselves into harnesses and landing boots. Behind them, the narrow standard glider standing nose down into wind. Right, one of the gliders, his takeoff run successful, soars upwards. Below him, the great natural bowl of the giant Soper's Bottom into which they drop. And it's got Downs maybe a mecca for hang gliding. And one other little bit of newspaper. The South Downs may become a major centre for the new sport of hang gliding. This became obvious when the chairman of the Coast and Countryside Committee, Sir Geoffrey Thistleton Smith, told West Sussex County Council on Friday. It may that will become involved in finding accommodation for them to practice their sport. And then watch. The Country Surveyors Department and the police are keeping a careful watch on the situation on the Bostel. It is regularly visited by police when gliding takes place. Having been advised of the new situation which has arisen in Bramber Parish with the advent of the hang gliding, the West Sussex County Council Vice Chairman, Mr Christopher Buchan Horsham, and his wife visited the gliding area on Saturday and clearly enjoyed the experience in the buffeting winds common to Soper's Bottom. More than 20 gliders were in use. There was no sign of incorrect roadside parking of cars along the Bostel. On the top of the drop into Soper's Bottom, the gliding was being carried out with disciplined precision, and everyone participating seemed to be thoroughly enjoying the sport. It looks as if the sport has come to stay on the Downs. On Friday, the Coast and Countryside Chairman revealed that as a result of the Sports Council approach, the County Planning Officer, Mr Peter Bryant, had been asked to prepare a report on the implications of the introduction of the sport into the county. For his committee, he had reported that this had been requested of the committee by the Greater London and South East Sports Council, subject to its receiving the guidance of the Civil Aviation Authority. He said that hang gliding practice at Mill Hill Shoreham had aroused concern among local residents and the Sussex Trust for Nature Conservancy about the dangers inherent in the sport, the nuisance and damage to their interests. Ada District Council, it was reported, in taking note of the local concern, was considering introducing a bylaw to control the sport in its district. There was no mention of the representations made by Bramber Parish Council about the practising of the sport into Soper's Bottom, a precipitous hollow in the Downs below the Bostel Road which runs over the Downs from Steyning to Sompting. The Parish Council had not objected to the sport as such, but had expressed concern about the possibility of a road accident on the Bostel arising from the inconsiderate parking by passers-by, stopping to watch the new sport. It had also been concerned about the possibility of gliders crossing or coming down on a bridleway which passes through Soper's Bottom. I mean, that just gives you an idea of what, when you get something new, like hang gliding was, this is what we all had to deal with, you know, long, when people like take up the sport now, whether it be hang gliding or paragliding, they buy a glider from the school or whatever, they turn up at the dike and they just, it's all taken for granted. Oh yeah, we fly here. What they don't realise is what the early boys had to do to ensure that happened. So really, and there was people. I'm not the main person that negotiated with this, nor was Brian. But like I said, there are people within our club that were better at this sort of stuff than I was. And the early hang glider pilots, ensured really that hang gliding and paragliding as it is now are a permanent part of society because we are accepted now, and by doing the things we did, we obviously got it right. So so I thought there's some more notes and stuff on this up here, but yeah. Okay, let's have a little bit of a slideshow now, shall we?
Yeah, this is Johnny had his old cine film from mid-1970s digitised, and I've just sort of edited it down a bit. There's one particular take of, if you look at it, Johnny was talking about knee hanger harnesses earlier, which were probably the first sort of actual harnesses, but you'll see somebody take off, and maybe Brian or Johnny will be able to tell us who it is, who basically was in the seated harness, but just leaned forward. You see them grab the front wires, put their feet up on the back wires, and that was sort of probably, I guess, one of the earliest prone flights, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I saw Brian do that one of the first.
It might have been you, Brian.
No, I've got to think it might have been Nick Regan actually, but let's have a look and I'll tell you what I think it is. Okay, can we have a light out then, please? Is that possible? Thank you. Cine is crap. I just wish we had this sort of technology we've got now. That's a guy called John Ivers, that was. He was the guy that was one of the directors in Highway. In Highway.
I was going backwards.
And down.
Yeah, let's see. Let me come back here. I can appreciate this. That's me taking off.
Your CB.
My CB24. That's the bag. That's Brian there. There you go, Brian. That's you. Yeah. And that's me taking off at Mill Hill.
God, look at the flutter.
The yellow helmet.
But that's how you were flying. I mean, one of the things, when they got rid of that flutter, it was a little bit harder because you knew that you were flying because it was fluttering. As soon as they...
there you go, look.
Yeah, that's Brian.
You tied up the train.
Now, I want you to imagine, right, when you these gliders, if you did this input on one of the modern gliders, does anyone know who that guy is?
That's not John Barrett? No.
That's Brian taking off, yeah. And he always got higher than everybody else.
He's pulling the wires.
Yeah.
We didn't have a system in there at that time to move the rake forward on the base bar. So if you wanted to fly prone, you had to sort of belly on the base bar.
Yeah. I think that's my Highway 260. That was my second glider. That's Malcolm Hooks was taking off at the dike. But yeah, there's some of the inputs you had to put in. You had to literally, you were getting turned into the hill. You had to hang out the other side of the.
That's still a dike. That's still a dike. No,
that's Nick Regan. Now, does it give you an idea of penetration on the dike?
Must have been
blowing 10 miles an hour.
It was probably blowing at 18 miles an hour actually. Because if it was blowing 14 miles an hour, it was just right. If it was 18, you were pushing it. And if it was blowing less than 14, you were going down.
When the gale at Barnstable, we got 6 people up on the gala once.
How much?
6.
6, yeah.
It was force-line gale. It was force-line gale.
on one regalo. Do you ever fly any bamboo ones?
No. Look at you always got this kick that tried to turn you towards the hill.
Yeah.
Look at that, don't you?
That's me and Miles.
They look easy.
See the balloons there? Every Christmas we used to, for good public relations with the people at the bottom of Poynings village, we would take a load of gifts down from the club and buy loads of little presents for all the kids at the school. And the kids would come out of school to meet us, so if it was flyable we'd take off and literally land at the bottom of the hill. And if it wasn't, we would just get there early, rig all the gliders up and pretend we had. And we used to have Father Christmas dressed up. It was always Steve Hunt, and he would just, you know, pass out the presents for all the kids, and it was a good PR job, and they loved it. You know.
Brilliant.
That's Nick.
The hand point is very, very low. The whole.
I tell you what, the first time I went slow, I thought I was in a sailplane. It was just ridiculous. You know, just it made such a difference to the drag. There was so little drag. But look, this is in front of the dike. You know, you wouldn't do that on hang glider now. You couldn't be like that. Yeah. You'd be thinking
A long way down, round and round.
Johnny, would you fly one of them now if you had the chance?
I don't think I would. No. I think I'd be scared.
Jason Bourne probably would.
Yeah, well, I probably would if I knew for sure it would fly. Oh, this chap here, I don't know what his name was, but he dreamed about top landing. He just always wanted the top landing, and he could never do it. And he would always, you know, fluff his top landing and go down. And then, and he did it. And I think it might be right at the end of the film, certainly on my original cine. And you see him, he lands, and then he falls backwards, and the glider falls on him.
360 was a very rare event.
Yeah, that was. Oh yeah, this actually was my first ever 360s that I did at Rossili, and this is when Brian did this, said to me, "This is the guy that he does his top landing." There he is. Way! He was so delighted. He was so chuffed. But yeah, Brian invited me to come down with him to Rossili this particular weekend, and
he's regretted it ever since.
No, it was fabulous, and I've learned to do 360s down there in Lift. And a quick story about 360s. You know, 360s when I learned to fly, we would do 360s now because we know we go into thermals and we climb in 360s and stuff. But when I learned to fly, we just literally take off, and Brian said we take off, go down, and the biggest thing that you could achieve when you got reasonable at it was being able to top land, because then you didn't have to walk back up the hill. But it took me about 32 or 34 flights before I top landed at Mill Hill, and I remember it was like, it was just so good. And we'd heard about, you know, a 360-degree turn, and it was a bit like I always do it was like an artistic manoeuvre, like in ice skating or in gymnastics. You know, it was a 360-degree turn was literally an artistic manoeuvre. And someone said to me, "Oh, Johnny, Ray Segrist has done a 360-degree turn, you know." And I said, "Where?" And he said, "Down at Truleigh Hill." And I drove along to Truleigh Hill, and Ray was there, and I said to him, "Have you just done a 360? He went, "Yeah." I said, "I want to see it. I've got to see you do it. I've got to see you do it." And I made him walk up to the top of the hill, and he took off. And you know how high Truleigh Hill is. It's pretty high there. And he took off, and he went out, and then by the time he had finished this 360-degree turn, he just had enough height to land into wind at the bottom. So he lost, you know, like 350 feet doing a 360-degree turn. I mean, that's how difficult it was. But if you could do it in lift, like Rossili, where it's big lift everywhere, it was all right. But I mean, that one was a good one. But my second flight, I stalled it halfway round, and you see the thing drop. And it was all right. I got away with it. But yeah. So 360-degree turns were literally an artistic manoeuvre that was, you know, so difficult to achieve, and people were pioneers like Ray Segrist. You know, he did the very first ever one that I'd ever heard of on the South Downs. You know. So what do you want to look at now then? We'll do them on slide.
I was just thinking, Johnny. I remember reading a piece by Bob Wills talking about how to go about doing your first 360. And in all seriousness, he said, "Don't do it unless you've got at least 1,000 feet ground clearance."
Tell you a story. When they started exams, you know, the big HGA started to say, "Well, we need to do exams and get pilots and get a pilot exam and a P1 and a P2 and a P3 and this and stuff." And I didn't do it, you know, because I'm useless at doing paperwork and exams. And, "Well, you ought to do it, Johnny. You set an example. You've been around a long time and all this." And I'm going back in the 70s still, you know. And well, and then And so he said, right, I was at Beachy Head, and he said, right, I want you to tell me, how do you do a 360-degree turn? And by that time, I mean, I was doing 360s like I was, you know, like I was walking, you know, it's just so easy. And I said, right, well, you just, and I thought the trick question was to make sure there was nobody behind you. So I said, well, you take off, get some height. I said, make sure you've got plenty of clearance. I said, have a good look behind you to make sure there's nobody there. I said, and then you just, if you're going to go right, you just, you know, right-hand turn, and go round, and then just before you come back, completely around the 360, opposite block a little bit, just, and then come back to the centre, level up, you know, all just, you know, kid stuff really that we do. And no, Johnny, no, it's not right, you know. And so I failed the exam, you know. And I said to him, he said, well, think about it. And I went down, and I did think about it, and I said, that is what you do. I do it all the time. He said, go up there and do it again. So I went up, and he said, think what you're doing. You know, and I went, all right. So I went up there, and I've done a load of 360s just to show him I could do 360s, mate. You know. And anyway, and I've done these 360s, and then I suddenly realised, you know, what it was. It was, you know, without thinking about it, you know, like when you ride the bike, you say you get on the bike and you pedal. No, you don't do that. You know, but you do. But if you don't pedal fast enough, you're going to fall off. You know, so. What I had to say to him was, well, yeah, but when I'm going round the 360, I've got to make sure I've got enough airspeed, you know, when I'm going round to make sure that, you know, I don't stall it into the, you know. And I went, oh, you know, so, but when I sussed it out myself, I thought, oh, well, actually, I'm keeping a bit of speed on here as I go round. So, but yeah, so that was the birth of pilot exams, you know, in them days. And I didn't even like them because I still don't like them now, but I had to do them. But yeah. Okay, carry on.
Sorry. Yeah, you have to use this cut to Queen's Don't Stop Me Now, but you can have to imagine. I think this is not all that long after we started Aero, so we're very fortunate to have a club member that owns an airstrip.
That's Will.
Yeah, Will Greenwood. So that gave us a great start. So and that's where this was filmed. Yeah.
Swanborough.
It is.
Aussie.
It's Tony who chased you there.
Aussie Hens.
It's old that's Ian Ferguson.
Is that Ian, is it?
Better on the grass.
Looks like.
His paraglide is the same colour as that, if that's Ian Ferguson. Two-tone.
Oh, right. Recognise yourself, Dave?
So you will in a minute.
Flying around.
You will in a minute.
Which Dave?
Dave Matthews.
Ah.
Yeah, so you just around the other side.
I do believe that's a paraglider there, isn't it? Is that a paraglider coming to land?
That's Will.
Love the trolley.
Still the same.
Still uses that trolley now, don't we? Still the same one.
That was me.
And the same trolley.
Only ever had the one truck.
Was that you?
Yeah, I think so. Dave
Oh no, it's not a paraglider.
No, it's the tub.
It's the tub and the drug chute, isn't it? Yeah.
Looks quite windy.
Yeah.
Whoops.
That's nice and high.
It's the cable.
Yeah, it is. It's the tub.
I want to see Aussie. Is Aussie there? Aussie Haynes.
I don't remember him doing that day. It's for a long time.
Yes.
Do you know those highway
Winglets.
no, it's airway gliders, those winglets.
Yeah.
Classic.
You had
one of those.
Was that Ron, Martin? Was that Ron?
Was it
Ron Richardson?
I don't think that was.
It's a possibility. Actually, Ron was about in there.
He did, didn't he?
Yeah. He's flying one of those gliders.
Yeah, that's true actually. Yeah, you're right.
Isn't there a danger those trolleys can sort of turn as you're launching?
Not really. I only tend to follow that.
There's Louis, so they're not like snagging in the grass and moving around like a shopping trolley. It's a little bit like a shopping trolley when they start off and there's a speed thing. So
You only got a few yards on this thing,
see, that did go back to the right a little bit.
Yeah. Is that you running there, Dave?
Looks like my haircut.
So we do a little assist.
You got to go.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, what started the hang gliding aerotone was that we would be sitting on the dyke in light winds and nobody wanted to take off and go down, but you knew that there would be a moment that if you got it right, you'd take off, go to cloud base and have a big XC, because the sea breeze, you'd have to catch it just right. But if you took off too early, you'd go down to the bottom, and then while you were packing up, your mate was going to be skying out. And so the times we sat there and just thought, you know, and then the sea breeze would come in from behind you, we'd turn the glide around and you'd look at the sky and it was amazing. And you'd say, if only we could get tied up with that, you know, just get linked up with that in the air, and that's what we, you know, started aerotowing.
So when did you start it? How many years ago?
Oh,
I've been on a day.
I don't know, how long ago was this, guys? In the 90s, was it?
The sea breeze came up the day. You went up.
But we could do, really could do with more pilots. That's why I am pushing this, you know, tonight, because hang glider pilots need to be aerotowing, because there is so much benefit for being aerotowing. It is absolutely, you know, wonderful aerotowing, and you know, I can't speak highly enough about it. I just think everybody should be doing it. You know, I mean, I drove to Norfolk to learn. You know, I drove to Tony Webb's place to get aerotow rated.
They were the first people that got the BHPA permission to.
Yeah, and a few of us went up there. Me, Lucchesi, Cookie, and you know. Right. So yeah, is that it, Martin?
Well, here's the stills.
Yeah.
Yeah, this sort of is it's not exclusively Southern sites or Southern pilots, but it's mainly, and it sort of shows, there'll be a few old faces, and it shows the evolution of the gliders over the years as well.
And the cricket field's on there.
No, I don't think it is it? It might be.
Does it?
It says T 90. There's Dale Clothier on the left.
Dale Clothier on the left.
Love the angle of those nose wires.
Keith Reynolds on the right, isn't it?
It could be Keith, actually, yeah.
Don't know who that is.
So what happened to all these guys of your generation, Johnny? Why did they give it up? How did you manage to keep going?
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I'm so chuffed that Brian's here, you know, got a major coup dragging him down here tonight, so, and, you know, I'm glad Terry's come as well, because Terry and, you know, Brian haven't seen each other for quite a few years, isn't it, Terry?
No, not since, I think the last time was Vasily.
And Dave Gopel and Chris Bartram, you know, it's just, you know, these are people that were sort of like really, you know, prominent Southern Angling Club members, you know.
Do you know who that is, Jim? Is it? Oh, right, okay.
It's the age of
Yeah,
battle.
this Mick.
That's not Mick Evans, is it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, Mick Evans died, sadly.
Some of them.
Who's that? How did he get in there?
Is that you, Martin?
No, it's you.
Is it me?
Yeah.
No, is it?
Yeah, this great
I don't
slater.
recognise that guy.
Good looking sky.
A bit of training going on here at Mill Hill.
I took all my kids up on the back.
Nick Reader without his crash early on again.
In fact, I took
Nick's died
10 kids up on
There you go, there's a few.
What? Who lands on who?
Now, that's the shoe Brian, yeah?
Yeah.
So,
That was a Hawksworth SST on it.
yeah. There's Roger Sylvester.
I wouldn't have known that, yeah.
Are they still alive, any of them?
This is Mill Hill, isn't it?
Yeah. That's Ray Sigrist.
I think Ray Seabury's still
There's
alive.
battles on the.
I would love to know if anyone finds him, get in touch with me because I'd love to speak to Ray because I say Ray was probably the first guy first real pilot I ever spoke to in England.
So they're getting better.
That's cool. So,
That's a moon.
No, this was it Ray?
Today's
I wondered whether it was.
That looked a bit like Ash. Could be. Yeah, that's this is Bob Weiser on the previous one.
Where's that? Is that?
Oh no, this is like in
Cosmos.
Waller Crag in the the Latrig in the latest.
Oh, Latrig is it?
Yeah. That's a beachy head.
that after it is.
They were very colourful hang gliders in them days.
I think that's Jeff Shine on
yeah, could well be.
I saw a video the other day with paragliders in the 80s, all sort of luminous colours.
Yeah, it's funny how it is. The early ones always prettiest, aren't they?
Yeah.
That's Dougie Maynard. Remember Dougie?
Yeah.
He's
cycling in there too.
Has he?
I think so, Dougie Maynard.
What was your first gliding, Dave?
Oh, you compared to you guys.
Oh, Christ, you weren't even born.
This is in the Peak Districts. That was a Lynn Gabriel's creation. That
Yeah.
one.
I'm not too disappointed I missed out on these days. Came along at the right time.
Now that was designed by Ian Grayland as well, that glider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, I was surprised. I thought he would be here actually, because he was a major player on hang gliding.
And he's a nice guy.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Does he still fly?
Yeah. Paragliders. He actually invented that somehow. Didn't he manufacture paragliders?
No, he's he's done a few sort of trick conversions and stuff like that. But he knows his shit.
Oh yeah. Well, he did.
This Dave Worth used to be editor of Wednesday.
That's kind of dropped out of it.
I mean, I remember him playing what he called a storm kite. It was a tiny miniature kite, that you could fly in a gale. A bit like speed gliding, I suppose. He was speed paragliding, and he had this storm kite, this thing, he flew. And it was just a one-off build. It was a really small, it's just a small hang glider, And because it was so small, it would fly in strong winds.
But that was fun to fly.
But he knew his stuff.
It's raining there.
Oh, that was scary.
Yeah.
He said he'd
Look at his harness.
From no slope in about 10 minutes of 6 inches of snow.
And you saw it coming.
Yeah,
right there.
He was flying a Cambridge glider, that's not Cambridge.
No, that's Terry.
That's Terry, is it?
Terry.
And later became.
You were flying a planter's glider, apparently, this set.
Was I? Yes, I was.
Oh, right, yeah.
Oh yeah, actually that picture there with the National Trust flag, when the National Trust first took over the dike from Brighton Council used to own it, the National Trust took over, and we were really concerned that they were going to try and ban us, but in actual fact they asked us to celebrate the taking over by flying around with one of their flags.
You know that glider, Johnny? That glider there was a 177 off a Pendry.
What, that one? The
planters one.
The planters one you were flying?
Right, and I bought it off of him. I got a really good deal off of him. He was in Spain at the time, we were flying, so I bought it. And I took it to the dike, and it was tight and it was really heavy. It had so much stuff in it, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
It had every last thing that Airwave could throw at it. And I went to the dike one day and I flew it, and then, I loved it, but I gave it to this fella came up, his bloody name now, one who died of cancer. No,
Not Mick Evans.
we worked on the Spitfire thing for years ago.
On the zip wires.
A Spitfire.
Oh, Spitfire.
Go on, put him in. And he said, "Can I fly your glider?" So I said, "Yeah." I said, "Go on." I said, "I'm going to go and get a drink or something at the pub and get something to eat." And he came down like a rocket, didn't he? And banged his head on a rock, and he was out like a light. So we got him up and away again. He was all wobbly and all that. Took him back, took him down to the bar down the road. We were all going for a meal, and he's sort of still a bit hazy. So I said to him, "You all right now to fly tomorrow?" So he said, "Oh, I think so." I said, "Of course, there is that £100 you owe me." He said, "Do I?"
Nice hotel.
But that was one of the first times he flew at Paraguay. Just fly anything, I think.
Well, I don't know, I think that will probably wrap it up for now, unless anyone's got any questions and things. I don't know what time is coming up to 10 o'clock. Is that about time for...
Oh, for us old people, it's time to bed.
Terry 5 minutes at a time. Your story about what happened to you at Koessen in the competition is there.
Yes. Come on, take the stage, bro.
Well, just quick, it was, we went out to Koessen with, I was flying for Wasp Air and it was on a CB 240. Well, it was really just a copy of a Seagull 3, but Wasp had made them with a 2-inch tube, so it was really heavy and liable. I thought these were the business. So when we went out there, we were thinking, this is good. And we got out there and the Yanks were out there with the truncated tips and and I thought, oh dear, we're not going to do very good here. But what happened was we'd been flying and we was making a film which actually went around with Pink Panther, called Free as a Bird. And my mate was the filmmaker, so we had bloody cameras on our backs and all this crap. But they used to take the gliders up on the T-bar, they took a couple of chairs off and put a big platform. So anyway, I got to the top, snow in there, and obviously it was thick snow, and we retrieved the glider, which was our one. And when I went to rig it up, I noticed, because the sails on them went on the airframe from the back, so the pockets on the side were completely sealed at the ends. So they went up and they was only screwed in at the nose. And to protect the pockets at the end, they had a big yellow plastic cover really, just a cap. And I went to rig it up and I thought, one of the caps has gone. This is ripstop nylon, and if you try to tear it, you might never do it. And I thought, well, that shouldn't cause any problem because the wind's trying to, when I'm flying, blow the sail back down the frame. And anyway, so I thought, yeah, I'll be all right. So the brief was we was going to go off. My friend was on I was sponsored by, as well as Wasp Air, but it was an AGV flash helmets that the importer of the UK sponsored us out there. So anyway, the bloke making the film said, right, I want you and your friend, both have black ones. He said, I want you to go out. He said, and I want you to do 360s opposite above each other and then come around doing all that other stuff. So I said, okay. So my mate was seated and I was prone. So again, I looked at this, it was on the left hand, it was on the right hand side actually, and I looked at it and where it had touched on the way up and knocked the cap off, it had just made a small cut. So you've got a 2-inch tube with just a tiny cut of ripstop nylon and the wind's trying to blow it this way. Nothing can go wrong. So I took off and I shouted to me mate just below me, I said, right, you ready? He said, yeah. I said, you go left, we'll do 1 360, I'll do a right. So we did this one and then I did another one and really cranked it up. And all of a sudden it felt like it was stalled. I thought, no, because he's on film. And it just dropped through and I could hear this horrendous noise and I looked round and the sail had come up to the cross tube on that side. So I'm now flying just on obviously 1 1.25.
An asymmetric collapse, boys. And gliders can do them.
So anyway, there was no backup tubes in them days, and I remember looking down, and because Koessen was all tree-line forest, and when you're going to go in, you think, them trees look terrific. You know, look like a feather bed, I'll go for that. But I was already over the fields. I thought, oh no, this is going to hurt. and it just started to spin like this, so much that it pulled out my hands, and I was just on the harness going round. And I just suddenly thought, you know, I went sort of, what? You know, I grabbed the bloody thing and I'm sort of trying to climb back in the frame, and I'm trying to aim right out the other side that was working, and all of a sudden, bang, it went back again, but it didn't go fully. But I'm flying, and as luck would have it, it was aiming back at the hill. And I remember thinking, please just keep going, you know, and it was straight into the trees. I was probably down to about 800 feet by then, from like a couple of thousand, whatever it was. And as I'm flying, I'm getting nearer and I could feel it still wanting to go off to the right, and I could not get any further out. I was hanging right out on the side on the wire and everything. And as I got over to the trees, I thought, yes. And I looked down, and it started to go, and there was literally one clearing, and it probably wasn't much bigger than the size of this room. And it started to go like this. And they got a bit on the BBC with their filming it, and they didn't really get any of the bad stuff, you just got a silly bit. But I'm now plunging, spiraling down, and I'm not going to catch one tree, I can see that. I'm going to go straight in between them all. Best thing ever, because as the ground came up, I sort of waited for the impact and hit the ground, and I'm laying there, and I could hear this hissing, because it's so silent in the woods with snow, and I could hear this hissing, and I'll never forget it. My toes and my fingertips felt like they were going to explode. Boom, my heart, you know. And I'm looking, I think, Christ, and I'm laying there, and I could hear this hissing, which was we had smoke canisters, and it was that in the snow. So I unhooked, and it's all it had done is where I came in sort of on the side, it bent the leading edge from the bolts that go through from the cross tube, it bent that right back. And because the people were flying over, and I was going, yeah, look, I'm alright, tell everyone I'm okay, you know. So anyway, I rigged it all up as best I could. Now I could hear the sirens going, because the rescue thing was a snowmobile with a big sledge thing on the back to put any one bits on. So that I folded it all up best I could. So that came up there on my old mate Eric Shaw, who I was flying with. He'd seen me go plunging past him. So he flew straight down to the chairlift, virtually flew up to the thing, jumped out, jumped in the first chairlift he could, push past everyone. And what he did was he jumped out the chairlift where there was a stream that ran down, because there's no way you're going to walk through the woods in the snow, because you was up to here in it. So anyway, he's gone through the stream, which was up to his waist, but of course he's going over the green rocks and everything's falling over. So when he eventually got to me, he was cut, bruised. So
worse than you.
Yeah. So he went, Christ, Woods, he said, you're still here. I said, because you know, don't be stupid. So anyway, I sort of cleaning my sunglasses type thing. Anyway, so when the people come up, I said, you better go in that, and I'll walk back. But what saved me was the fact that where there was no trees, it was so deep with snow, and that's what I went in. This huge snow pile, must have been, 15 deep. So it was like going to a big cold cushion.
Was it the week after that, Brian, that you ordered a parachute?
No. But that was a pretty close one. And that's what I said to you. I was so much like the amateur in sport. But yeah, that was good.
Thank you, Brian.
That's right.
What I would like to do, not now, but in 2 years' time, when the Southern Hang Gliding Club reaches 50 years old, what I think would be really nice, maybe we can talk to the committee about this, Robin, is have an afternoon and an evening sort of session, a bit like this for everybody. Have someone talk about paragliding as well, so that we can bring some of the paragliding boys here and just have a really nice 50th birthday or something, because it's a milestone, a half century of the Southern Hang Gliding Club, so just if I'm still around, I'll do a bit,
I'll go in somewhere.
So it's just a thought, so maybe something along those lines. But yeah, so if that's it, Robin, I'll wrap it up now. It's 10 o'clock gone, so...
Yep. Well, can I thank Johnny, Brian, your friends and colleagues who've come along from the hang gliding community, and everyone.